have three great panels this afternoon that we're going to finish up our discussion for today for workshop number 102. We talked a bit this morning about the importance of engaging your communities. And so to take us into that, what are the first steps of community engagement? Leading us in that presentation this afternoon is Nancy Ward, who is a strategic consultant with Solarity. Nancy has been in this business for 20 plus years and brings a lot of executive leadership talent to the Solarity team. She has extensive experience in strategic consulting programming, change management, training for government, higher ed, public and nonprofit sectors, specializing in setting and implementing strategic directions to achieve the intended goals. Kevin talked to you a moment ago about the goals and knowing what your vision and what you want to accomplish. She has been a consultant with the Kentucky Communications Network Authority for Kentucky Wired, as long as around many other local governments and entities that she's been working with in the technology arena. Joining Nancy on her panel this afternoon will be Steve Baker. Steve is from London and Laurel County. He is the broadband project coordinator there. He also serves as the superintendent of the London Utility Commission. One of the things that's near and dear to my heart with the utility people being involved here is that in our trying to look at infrastructure as a whole for our communities, broadband is one of those infrastructure pieces. But it certainly, we have water and we have electric and we have roads as well. So having all of those folks and having someone in a utility interested in broadband is always a positive. Steve oversees a team of 30 full-time employees, and he's responsible for all aspects of the London Utility Commission. He has a degree in engineering from the University of Kentucky, is a licensed water distribution operator and professional engineer. He is passionate about helping Eastern Kentucky be a place where future generations can thrive. He has 3 children, so that makes sense. And then we have Tim Gibbs, who is the CEO and president of the Ashland Alliance. He was born and raised in Kentucky, in Lexingont and Moorhead. So he was like coming home today, and he was very excited to be here. He's a graduate of Moorhead State University and Eastern, and he is married to his, this has endeared me, his, we always say your better half, his better 3/4, right? She gives her more credit, Beverly Gibbs, originally of Boyd County. Before going to Ashland, he was the CEO of Greater Grace Harbor, a combined chamber of commerce and economic development in Aberdeen, Washington. Has also served as the ED for Industry and Workforce Development in Colorado, and as the deputy county judge in Rowan County as well, and judge executive. His hobbies include classic cars, sports, and travel. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our community engagement panel.
Thanks, Hilda. You heard a lot about community engagement earlier this morning, but we're going to drill down a little bit. And before I turn it over to my esteemed panelists, I'm going to give you some food for thought as it relates to community engagement. So in the first workshop, we talked a high level about what it is. But today, we're going to talk more about how it's achieved and what does it take to do it. So what is it? It is to educate and inform your community, and it involves seeking input and feedback from all different types of stakeholders and user groups about broadband. We're specifically talking about community engagement for broadband. So why is it important? Well, it really clarifies the purpose of what broadband's about and brings the community together to form a good support coalition. It strengthens your partnerships with not only your community constituents, but also some perhaps potential providers or other communities that you may want to partner with. And it also, for you elected officials, it really brings to your attention what matters to your constituents. So there is a very big piece of the game for community officials for community engagement. So what's some success factors associated with successful community engagement? Well, it's an inclusive process. It solicits input from all the different stakeholders out there. Another big success factor is active and visible sponsorship and leadership. You've heard a lot about leadership today. You're going to hear a lot more about leadership later today. but you really need to embrace this, that it's just not a one person can do all this. You need active and visible leadership on a sustained basis. And every community in Kentucky, in the nation I imagine, are unique. So really your engagement activities need to be customized to fit the culture and the environment of your community. So bottom line, what's the end in mind? Well, the outcome is that you want support for your last mile solution, whatever that is, whatever that looks like, and you want the community to be aware of it and adopt the use of the internet for meaningful usage. So those are sort of the high level, what it is, why is it important, what are success factors, and what is the ultimate goal here for community engagement for broadband. So I'm not going to teach a college level class here, but basically, how do you achieve it? Well, there's different objectives in your engagement activities. You can educate and inform, which I think Judge Brock was very clear on that this morning, that the folks in his community needed to be educated about it and informed about what is it? What is broadband? When you say broadband, there are lots of different ideas about that, what it is. So educating and informing your community about what it is. You may want to consult with some folks, involving them, collaboration, and empowering them to use it and get behind it. So these are just some of the methods that you can use to engage with your community folks. How do you do it? Well, there's different ways to do it, but basically you need to plan for it. You can't just let it happen. You need to think through it and plan for what outcome you want for that engagement activities. And then you determine your best approach for that. What is your approach? Are you going to consult, involve, collaborate, or educate? And then you select your best tool for that. There are a lot of engagement tools out there, but you need to pick the one that you feel would lend itself to the best outcome for the planned activity, such as an educational event, town halls, focus groups, surveys, or even social media. More and more is getting used for community engagement. And then once you get the feedback, you need to compile it and look at it. What is this telling me? What are the people in my community telling us? So what does that take? Well, leadership. You'll see this is a common theme throughout all the last mile discussions we have today. You need to be planning and organizing it. It's just not shoot from the hip type of process. It is an investment, time, money, and effort. And lastly, it's not a one-time event. You have to sustain your engagement efforts throughout the life of your broadband last mile. So very quickly in summary, it's an community engagement. It's an ongoing, dynamic, ever-changing process. It needs to be customized for your community for a best fit solution. It requires planning, investment, and you want the outcome is to achieve community-wide access and adoption, increase ongoing broadband consumerism, and using broadband for your community to achieve the true quality of life that every community is after. So with that said, I'm going to ask Steve. These are the practitioners of engagement. So I'm going to let Steve and Tim talk a bit about what their perspectives are on engagement and how they've gone about doing some of it.
Practitioner of engagement. I'm going to put that on my business card. Nate, that sounds good.
I've been called worse. Okay.
I'm certainly not an expert on broadband in general, and am not much better, I guess, on strategic planning and engaging community, but we have done some of that in our community, and I represent London Utility Commission, which is a wastewater utility for the city of London. And so obviously we don't own any power poles. We're certainly not in the broadband business, but we depend on broadband like every other utility and most every business more every day. And when we began to hear about the Kentucky Wire project, that kind of put a bug in my ear to figure out how we could leverage that in London. And found out really quick that there was a lot of questions that needed to be answered. A lot of technical details and a lot of issues that we couldn't even really get our heads around. And I found out real quick that before we could even get to the technical details and figuring out where to pull a map out and design where to send broadband and where to hang fiber and where to partner with Kentucky Wire and all those other questions was, does this community even need it? Do they want it? how much are they willing to pay for it? Are we the only people that are kind of wrestling with this discontent over what we have now? And so through talking to some folks, Larry Combs with Center for Rural Development was one of those critical people early on that kind of helped me start to even know what questions we need to be asking. And what we decided to do was to engage a planning consultant to help us as a community get together in a room over a series of months and to just kind of dream a little bit together. And that turned out to be a phenomenal process for our community. I've said since that process has been completed, and we've got a strategic plan for broadband in Laurel County now. And I'm proud of that document, I'm proud of that process, but if we never do anything else with broadband, I think that strategic planning process is bearing fruit because it got people together that before that had never even met one another. Community leaders in a small town like London, there were people, the superintendent of our local schools and the CEO of our local hospital had never met. And conversations started happening like that are really invaluable. So I'll talk more about that in specifics, but that's how we found, as a starting point, community involvement really was spurred by that. And it's still bearing fruit today. And I think it's put us on a path to where as we wrestle with the financial model details and the technical questions and the where to build and when to build and how to build, those that community involvement piece had to precede all that in order for us to be successful.
Okay. Tim, you share your perspectives?
Well, first off, thank you for having us here. I think this is a great service to the region that the center is doing by bringing the expertise to the table and engaging people, engaging the communities to think about what's next. But to get there and to get your community involved, you got to find what motivates them as well. And so I think there's a bigger picture here. And there's a little different way to look at it than just, we need it, how do we get it, and who's going to do it. And I know that's the premise of it, and we're drilling down to that. But Eastern Kentucky as a whole, its population's not growing. Most places is either static or in decline in their population. And if you look around the audience today, look at who's here, and look at who is not here as well. Who's going to be the people sitting in these seats in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? What choices are they going to make? They're going to make a choice of where they want to live. Do they want to live in a community where they can get 100 meg service? They want to live in a community where their Amazon Prime accounts or their Whole Foods or whatever it may be, what comes next, they can tap into and it's there tomorrow. You know, if you think about it, Harry Cottle, 30 years ago, was talking about isolation in Eastern Kentucky, and there's been a lot of work done on that, on the road system. We've got a great road system, and some of which is even getting better now as we speak. This is the new roads. This is the new transportation system. And yet, I think we had one student here earlier, and he left at lunch, I think. We need their voice as well. So if you're going to engage a community, you've got to engage everyone in the community. And do you think that you feel the same way about broadband that your kids do, that possibly your grandkids do? So we got to engage everybody. And we also have to think about this holistically as well. Broadband alone is not going to keep our youth in Eastern Kentucky. We have to have economic development. We have to have jobs. We have to have opportunity. We have to have something called hope. They got to be able to think that they can live their life and possibly even do better than their parents did before them. So I think if you look at the SOAR initiative, if you look what's happening in pockets all over Eastern Kentucky, broadband is an entirely important component of it, and the conversation and the engagement of the community has to be done on multiple levels. We don't want to lose population. Those that are most vulnerable to leaving, this is probably one of the most important components for. You know, if their phone doesn't work, if they can't play Spotify, whatever it may be. So I don't know if we've framed it in that way, that this is a building block of economic development in a way for an audience that may be underrepresented at what we're doing here today. So all of that being said, how do you engage your community and how do you engage those that many, many times, you know, they're not a part of the process? That's going to be a unique challenge. Because they're the ones, we heard earlier that you may have financed this to 30 years. Which one of you is going to be paying that bill in 30 years from now? So there's very, very important components about how you phrase this, how you holistically look at this, how this is a part of the strategy of where we're going as a community and as a region, and what kind of partnerships it takes to do it as well. You know, for us, we have a little bit of a renaissance going on in Northeast Kentucky. There has been good news, maybe for the first time in 45 years, that people think that their kids are going to have a better opportunity than they did. That's powerful. Now, we are still wrestling with the same issues that you are here today. I pay $80 a month for 6 meg service that I never get over 2.8. $80. Can't do a Dropbox file from home. So we're all dealing with similar issues of how we do better at this. You know, in the 1920s, they were thinking about this when they were trying to get electric into houses. They figured it out then, and we will figure it out now. But it's we're going to have to do what isn't being done on the national level. We're going to have to come together as a community. We have to find common ground, and we have to find solutions to those issues. And I applaud the leadership you're hearing about in this room today of communities that are doing just that. But engagement in the community is terribly important, but it has to be done in a holistic fashion of what is your objectives. Do you want your kids to stay here? Do you want to see your grandkids be raised? Engage them in the conversation as well. Do it as a holistic strategy of economic development, of giving them an opportunity to work and live and prosper in their community.
Thanks. I think you heard a lot about trying to start with the end in mind and creating a vision for your community. Oh, sorry. I think you've heard a lot of discussion about starting with the end in mind and doing some planning to help create the vision. Could you all address that? If you sat in a room and just wrote up the own vision for your community, what impact that would have on the successful outcome of your broadband implementation?
Yeah, I think anybody who's ever led any kind of organization or even tried to get your kids to agree on what restaurant to choose, you know that if you just dictate to the group, you're probably going to get minimal input and buy-in. And I think that's especially true in this situation. If you try to just, you know, we before we ever started looking at the community, we kind of felt like, well, here's what it might look like. Here's what we think we might ought to build or try to get built or try to get these partners involved. But we realize even if we go through an entire planning process and none of that really changes dramatically, the process of getting people involved and giving them a seat at the table gives them an opportunity to have some ownership in the project. And you know, in London, Laurel County, it can't be the City of London's project. It can't be the Utility Commission's project if it's going to be successful. It has to be the community's project. And you know, thankfully that we've made plenty of mistakes along the way, but that's one that we realized early on we need buy-in from key leaders in the community, and we were able to do that. Up to this point, we're still, like I said, we're certainly not the poster child of success yet, but we feel like we do have the community buy-in that's going to be necessary to keep moving forward.
Tim, do you have any perspectives on if you just sit in the room by yourself and write the vision for broadband, the impact it would have?
Well, the impact is that we would actually have a competitive advantage, not just be even. I mean, if you think, you hear about gigabyte cities, you hear, and we're talking about how to get to megabyte into our community and what the definition of what broadband is to each one of us. It's a little different. And even, I even learned today that there's even different measurements other than gigabyte and megabyte on whether it's by air, it's by fiber, the latency issues. There's all kinds of different issues. But my vision would be that we are not just staying even, but we're getting ahead. We got a competitive advantage because I can sell that. If we got a competitive advantage, if I can make an economic case of why someone can be successful in this community or why an entrepreneur can operate from his house or his garage and become the next Ashland Oil Fortune 500 company or whatever it may be. They started here too. So for me, I think it would be that we don't strive just to get even, but we strive to set ourselves and have an economic advantage for our region and our people.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What impact would community engagement for broadband have on its adoption and take rates? What would you, how would you answer that question?
I think it's kind of hitting around the same thing again, Nancy. I don't want to be repetitive, but I'll just give you an example of in London. We don't have our own network built yet. Maybe we may or may not ever have it built. But after the planning process that we went through, essentially we got members of every major sector of our community in the same room. We had folks representing community college, higher education, local public schools, faith-based communities. We had high school students involved. The healthcare community, the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, just the gamut of 20 to 30 people that had their hand in just about every aspect. And what that essentially did, and I had no idea this would happen. And matter of fact, I've told Nancy this, that I was a cynic when it comes to strategic planning, because I've been through, and most of you have been through strategic planning at your company or organization, and you pay a consultant a lot of money, and you go through these meetings, and you get a document, and you stick it on the shelf, and you move on with life, and it draws dust. And I didn't want to do that, but what we realized was when we started meeting and learning that the CEO of our hospital had been trying to find a way to get better internet so that he could become a telehub for our region, or a telemedicine hub. Our Chamber of Commerce was getting calls daily from entrepreneurs that said, I want to have a local business. I've got an idea for a business, but I've got to have better internet. Do you know of a place in town that I could rent that's got better internet than this place? And around the table, the superintendent of the local schools had dreams about being able to do more education opportunities at home and get cheaper internet for kids at home. And so we found that we were all kind of rowing toward the same goal, but we were in different boats. And so being able to get them all in the same room, we can kind of now, months and over a year since we finished that process, I still get calls from people saying, hey, I heard about this idea. I want you to know if I can help, let me know. As you know, anybody who's tried to get volunteers to do stuff that they're not getting paid to do and to serve in a community, that's gold. And that would have never happened if we had just published a vision statement and said, here's what the London Utility Commission is going to do, and here's how we're going to do it, and here's what we need you all to do to help us. They would have said, good luck with that, let me know when it's finished, and maybe we'll sign up. But now, we've got more people willing to help, and I think that's going to be a game changer for us.
So in other words, you built some economies of scale there, where the individuals going out seeking their own broadband capabilities. Tim, do you have any perspectives on the take rate impact by community engagement?
Well, first off, most successful public policies, there's a push-pull. I mean, leaders are pushing it, and there has to be a pull from the public as well. There has to be a demand from the public to do it as well. And if you have an incomplete equation of one of those things but not the other, your idea of success is highly diminished. So if you can go through the process in engaging the public and really listening to the public as well, but also providing a leadership vision, and you have that magical moment where those aligned, your idea of success is going to be greatly increased. So many of the things you just said it was when you get the partners around the table and you have a common conversation, there's buy-in. And that's a magical thing for a community when they know where they're going and they have a vision how they're going to get there. So the process is important as almost the product itself.
Just one follow-up to that, too, that we've seen, too. We were really fortunate that our county judge executive and our mayor they work great together, and that really makes a big difference. And they've both supported this effort from the beginning, but from the political side of things, when they see and their phones ringing asking and supporting this initiative, it gives them even more willingness to kind of stick their neck out and take more risks because they see there's a public support of it versus just the local utility guys down there dreaming about broadband and, I'm not going to risk my reputation on just his idea. It becomes the community's idea.
And Steve, if I remember correctly, did your fiscal court vote of confidence for that strategic plan?
They did. At the end of the
also?
day, we went to both our city council, our utility commission, and the fiscal court, and they unanimously endorsed our plan. Essentially, the goals we outlined as a community of this is what London Laurel County wants in terms of broadband, they unanimously said we're in support of that.
So that was sort of just a substantiation of the community engagement effort for that strategic plan.
Yeah.
The city officials, county officials said, great,
Yeah.
good. In y'all's estimation, what are the barriers or opportunities for community engagement in your communities?
I'll let you take that one first.
I think there's all kinds of minefields out there. First off, there's existing companies that are providing these services as well. Now, they may not be doing it quite the way everyone would want them to do, but they've got a business model, and they made investments in your community, and they are there. So the idea of the shiny new penny is always the best one may not be the case, and you've got to have a way to engage your existing company as well and see if there's a better way with the partners that you have, and that's a difficult proposition. So I think that's a potential pitfall that you've got to work with there. Secondly, as we heard today, technology moves pretty fast. So you want to provide the leadership and you want to provide the direction for your community, but who's to say 7 years from now something comes along in your investment and you can't be stymied by that and be afraid never to work because it may someday become obsolete. But that is also a concern that you have to bring to the table is what you're bringing to the table, can it be amended? Can it change with the technology as well? And is it a way forward? So I think there's several things as far as public policy out there and also from the private sector that there's nuances that you have to be aware of, and if you're not, you're going to get yourself in trouble in your community pretty quickly.
Okay. Steve, you have any comments?
Yeah, I think just the overall, and maybe my community's maybe more so like this than others, but I just sense there's a lot of cynicism just in general about making a major change like this. This is I say once in a lifetime opportunity for our region. It's in London. The only thing that I think I could compare it to as far as infrastructure is when Interstate 75 was built through Laurel County and North and South United States. That literally put London on the map, and so we kind of have that opportunity here again. Like Tim said, this is the roads of the future, and but even so, you may see that or I may see that. There's a huge portion of our community that just folds their arms and says, "I got internet, all I want," and I don't think you should be wasting any time or money on that. And so there's we've got a big hill to climb as far as educating, I think, people on the need for it, not only today but the future. My argument when someone says, "Well, I've got internet at my house, it works fine. Why do you need any more?" And I said, "Well, when they built 75, US 25 was in London. You could get to Lexington from London, but it'd take you 2.5 hours. But now you can get there in 45 minutes because it's a game changer because of the greater capacity, and that's what we're trying to plan for the future with broadband. And so, the biggest uphill, I think, barrier or challenge is just getting over that initial cynicism and educating the community on what broadband is. We had a lot of really leaders in our community that we had to define what the term broadband was, and I suspect that's probably we're not the only town like that. So.
Okay, thanks. Hilda, how are we doing on time? 1:18. Okay.
Wow.
What approaches do you think work best for your community, Tim, in engaging? Every community is different, and you sort of have to build it to fit the culture and your environment.
Well, every community is different, and every community is changing. Think about, 10 years ago, you'd run an ad in a newspaper. And I know we have a great newspaper partner. We have a great newspaper, daily paper. But information moves fast. Put a tweet out. I'm sure some of you are tweeting about this event today here. Facebook. There's so many ways to bring technology and communications to the forefront instantaneously that we're having to adopt and we're having to amend how we have conversations. Now, if you're under the age of 25, you may sit in the same room and text each other rather than talking to each other. But if you're an organization or you're a government unit, you now have to use social media, and that can be a loose cannon at times as well, because every single point of view can be expressed very openly and very, very quickly. And that's both good and can be bad, depending on what perspective you come to the table. So I think you have to, if you're going to, once again, going back to my initial comment of trying to make sure everyone that's engaged, you have to use a plethora of ways to do it, including social, because many of the people, they don't pick up a newspaper. They're not getting, their news off the radio because they don't listen to the radio.
Oh, absolutely. And what we're seeing in the engagement approaches, more and more is headed towards social media. I mean, it's mainly, because that's the way people communicate mainly right now. Like it or not, that's the real world. So, yeah.
So you got to engage that.
Great point. Steve, any comments about your engagement culture there?
Yeah, all that about social media is critical, and we've been able to use that. We actually produced a little video of kind of our goals for kind of a phase 1 project once we got to that point, and it's on YouTube, and our Chamber of Commerce has shared it on their Facebook page and things like that. But before that all got started, again, I keep going back to that, getting some of the best people in your community in the room and begin to share that vision. I don't think you can replace that, and I'm a big social media supporter, and I think it is the future, but it will always be supplemental, in my opinion, to a leader getting in a room and casting a vision for a better future for your community. And somebody somewhere has to, in your community, in my community, grab the reins and say, I'm willing to sacrifice some of my time and do some things I'm not getting paid to do because I believe in this. And personally, if you don't have that leader, if you don't have someone, if you're not willing to do that, I think it's, you can probably go through it for a little while, but you got to have somebody that's willing to just keep at it, and have some endurance with it. Because, when I first started, we engaged a planning consultant, and the first step was, here's a list of different sectors that we need to engage, and I said, well, I'll try to get these people in the room. And so I started calling people, and they were like, who are you, and what do you want? And I'm already on 15 other committees, and I'm the same guy that's volunteering at every, we've all got that list of people that we know are community-minded in our small towns, and they're already overbooked. And if you don't have some passion and really able to sell that vision up front, just getting them to that first meeting is probably one of your biggest challenges. But yeah, from that, it makes a difference.
Yeah, you just answered the next question, is what contributing factors you think are required for successful.
Yeah.
Nancy, I got one more thing I'd like to add to this as well. Kentucky's got 120 counties, and I know we could spend 2 hours just on that alone, and we're not doing away with any of them anytime soon, because I'm from Round County. I get it. I understand about the allegiance to your county, but I think most people know that when they were forming these counties, they wanted you to be able to get on your horse, ride to the county seat, do your business, get home before nightfall. So they want you to be able to do your business and get back in a day. If you use the same analogy, we'd probably have 3.5 counties in the entire state. And there's a lot of cities as well in all of these counties. But when you have these lines and these allegiances to these lines, sometimes it makes for very, very difficult and maybe not the most efficient public policies that could be brought to the table. Now, the questions we're having, as difficult as it's been presented here today, if you had a blank piece of paper, you asked me that question earlier, if you had a blank piece of paper, what would it look like? And it may not look nothing like what we currently have, where you would stop here, and then from here on out, it's somebody else's responsibility to figure that out. If you think more about a labor shed, you think about commuting patterns, you think about alignment of resources and such, there may be a better way as well, and a broader conversations that would make this a little bit easier, but that's in a perfect world. And so if you asked for the blank piece of paper, and if I had what it would look like, it was for us to at least have conversation on a broader sense of, is there a more efficient, effective way? And if so, what model would that be? And does it stop at the county line?
Okay, just to summarize, I think the main intent on community engagement is trying to get your community needs established, not the solution yet, but what is it we need and want as a community to move forward on broadband. So I think at the end of the day, that's what we're at, and how do we maintain that current level of need, needs assessment, what is it we want as you begin your discussions with your incumbent providers or new providers, this is what my community wants, and this is what we're willing to partner with on. Okay. Any other comments before I open it up to questions?
One other thing I would just put a plug in for strategic planning as on a community basis is, strategic planning for us is not just about creating another binder to put on the shelf. It was a process, and we've got relationships that we've been able to maintain because of that. But the other thing it does is when, some of the snake oil salesmen and some of the other people that come knocking on your door, when you hear, hey, London's here, they're thinking about broadband, maybe there's an opportunity there. And we've had a lot of conversations with people who are fantastic business people that may be future partners that we've been able to meet. They're not all snake oil salesmen, I believe. But one of the ways that you can help, it gets, at least for me, it gets foggy quick when you start talking about the technical side of the broadband options and the models and things, and you hear a lot of technical information thrown out. And it's always helpful for me to pull out that document and say, well, as a community, here are our no matter whats. These are the things that no matter what else we do, here's what our plan must accomplish. Affordable access and some of the other goals that we laid out as a community, that we can look at it and say it has to benefit all of these sectors or we're not going to do it. And that kind of gives us the goal, the guidelines to kind of stay between the lines rather than getting off in the weeds and getting into a project that's really not accomplishing what the community wants. If you've got that established already and you've got the community buy-in, it makes it so much easier when you start making decisions, that are going to actually impact people.
Any comment?
I think you're spot on. I think most people want the end result. Whether or not it's delivered by one entity or another entity, it's somewhat of a commodity if they get decent support. So whatever the most efficient way to deliver that would be for what the community is asking for. I think that's where the vision of the leaders and the region has to come together to find the most efficient way to do it.
Certainly. Okay. I think we'll open up for questions, if you'll have any questions at this time. Hilda gave me more time than anybody, so I wasn't quite sure.
Well, I was building a little time on lunch. We've been so good on time. So, Larry, did I take your roving microphone? All right. You'll have to share there.
Sure.
I'm not sure where the other one, too. Let me start while Larry's, anybody raise your hand if you have a question, but I want to ask one. And as you have looked at engaging your community, we've talked today about having to educate people. It is a very complex thing. We want it, but we don't know exactly what it is, and we certainly don't know how much it costs. Have you tried educating them? I'd like your little video piece, but have you done public service announcements? Have you done local, if you have a local cable community program? Have you, I've had communities that would have like ice cream socials on a Sunday afternoon, invite the public and show the different things or touch the different things or whatever. Have you done any of that in your efforts to just sort of reach out to your community and give them a safe place to ask dumb questions or look at something or feel about it?
We plan to do some of that. We haven't yet, Hilda, because and this may or may not be a good idea, and I'd love some feedback on this from anybody, that is, we wanted to be able to have everybody's first question is going to be, where are you building it? Can I see a map? Is it going to be by my house? Is it going to be by my business? We don't have answers to that yet. So as soon as we do have a phase one project and a funding model and questions answered like that, I think those would be invaluable opportunities to do that. What we have done is we've presented our project and our dreams to the Chamber of Commerce, which has probably been the single best outlet because we have a really active chamber, and the executive director there, Deanna, is awesome about supporting the project and talking it up to her members. So that's filtered down into the community. Presenting it to the fiscal court and to the city council has been a really great place because we got some media coverage in that. And one thing I would highly recommend, I love our local newspaper, but any time I have any type of major announcement or any type of discussion, I present them a written media release. Make their job easy, because if not, details get messed up, and then you're playing catch up trying to correct some misconceptions. So, if you're going to speak at a public hearing of any type, I recommend having make life easy for that reporter, and just give them a press release and let them ask any follow-up questions. And that's really all we've done. And really, we're ready, probably need to take some next steps, but that's kind of set the groundwork to do some of those other things that we need to do.
Mr. Gibbs.
We're in a little different spot that we have an urban area and a rural area, both in the urban area. There's multiple providers already, so you have choice and there's competition in the marketplace, and I think that's really what we're wanting to have, is having choice and competition and options.
That drives the
Yes.
price down and gives more options to your
Yes.
constituents and your
Yes.
businesses. Absolutely.
But we also have a rural clientele as well that really doesn't.
Have choices.
That I think we did on our Work Ready application. We had to do. It asked the question of how many people have access to high speed, and we were, I think, the 99th or 98% does, one way or the other. I mean, it can be wireless, it can be all kinds of different things, and I know there's facts, lies, and statistics on what people define high speed from. So we almost have to have two different strategies within one community about the rural versus the urban, and that's been a difficult conversation. It is going on. There has been presentations to our fiscal court, which is probably the appropriate place for that. There's been conversations between our county and our city as well about where they can collaborate and such, but we haven't made that step yet. Because I don't know if we've truly defined and taken the step of this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. Now, we are doing an engagement. The community has been involved. My organization's been involved in that as well, but we're not quite there yet.
So, but you do see the value in sort of educating your public, and I'd say Nancy would probably say that's very important to help them understand. And I take that only from some of the borrowers at RUS that used to, when they first got into the broadband world and selling higher speeds and all, and they would do that, and they would do very local things, like I said, ice cream socials on Sunday afternoon, invite people in, get an idea of what it is, so that they at least, know what it, and it's not a high-end expensive thing. Larry?
When we begin an engagement with a client, we go into some executive steering teams, and each one of them have a different idea of what broadband is. So I thought, whoa, we can't move forward until we come to a common understanding and viewing of what broadband is and what it's not. And so that I get reassured of that most every time we engage with a client.
Have anybody in the audience engaged in this strategic planning process? Any of your communities? Nobody's done this yet. We think it's an important first step, and nobody's done it yet. Okay.
Questions from the audience?
Would you like to do it?
I don't want the word strategic planning to create a no factor, right? There's a lot of different views and experiences with strategic planning. And what I think we have to understand is when we talk about strategic planning, we're talking about thinking strategically for the long term. So it's not into an academic process. I mean, it's, so I just know when we use those words, eyes glaze over, and they say, never mind. So I just wanted to share that.
Right, and I've personally been involved in several strategic planning sessions in different communities, and the Commonwealth of Kentucky actually put funding out early on for some of the studies to actually take place, and I believe Ashland was actually.
We did do one, and we set together on the kickoff meeting of that as well,
Yeah.
and they have their final results in hand for the city of Ashland, and they actually tried to expand that scope as well, and not just do it for Ashland, as you remember, but think of Boyd County, even parts of Greenup County, since the lines are so interchangeable there. So there has been a process there. There has been community involvement, which you were aware of as well on that. But that next step is a daunting one, and that hasn't been taken yet.
And do we have anybody in the room that was actually part of the Gateway process? Doc, you were? What was your impression of it? If you don't mind saying a few words.
It's needed. I think we need to look at our counties, though. We basically had the 5 counties. We've talked with some of the board members, and there's a leaders on. I think Jim Tom was more active than I was on that. But I think that's what you've got to do. You've got to try to get people involved, and I guess the best way was to get the political leaders involved first, and that was kind of what we tried to do. But I know Jim, Tom, and I are going to both continue to try to do questionnaires and have public meetings as well, because we're serious. I think if we don't do this, we're going to be left behind. And I don't want to be left behind. I don't think my community wants to be left behind. So I think it's part of it. You got to get the ball rolling.
A quick question. Do we have anybody with the press in the room? Why not?
Because they answered all of them, I guess. So,
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Nancy and your panel, Jim, Tim, and Steve. Thank you very much. Give them a big round of applause, and we'll get on there. It is important to build your support, and when you go after them for a tax referendum, you better have their support. So, we know what you're spending it on, right?